What's up, everybody? It's Megan here from Student Loan Planner, one of the senior student loan consultants on the team. And today we're going to chat about whether or not Trump may repeal the SAVE plan. And I'm going to keep things short and easy at the start of this. And I think the answer is yes. I think the SAVE plan is at risk right now for being repealed. And so what we're going to talk about in this video is how this can happen, what we need to do about it, and who needs to be concerned, who needs to take some action, and what to expect here coming up. So let's start with how the heck can this even happen, right? How can they rip the carpet out from underneath us with this SAVE plan that was implemented back in fall of 2023? And the reality is it has to do with the ICR statute that they're arguing this case under or about. And basically, the ICR statute, which developed the pay plan, the repay plan, and ultimately the save plan, was brought about by negotiated rule making. And this is essentially kind of a fancy way to say, like, there was some policy change and there was a committee involved, and it did not have to go through the legal process or the legislative process and get votes from Senate on bringing these plans into play. It was more of an executive order kind of thing. So that's how this is able to essentially get reversed or repealed. It wasn't brought about by legislation such as the income-based repayment plan, or IBR, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Now, that's that. Let's not dwell, though. I think there are still some really positive things that we can do with our student loan situation to keep pushing ourselves forward towards income-driven repayment, public service loan forgiveness, or even the income-driven repayment forgiveness as well. So I think this sounds really scary, and I can understand that the SAVE plan was very attractive. It was very generous, I would say, with the payment calculation and the forgiveness details, basically. But I think there are still really good options that we can take advantage of. So let's talk about that and how we can move forward here. So there's a couple people or a couple buckets that you can sort yourselves in to decide what your next steps are going to be. And if you are currently someone who's on the SAVE plan, you have been in the forbearance status, the SAVE forbearance status, probably since the summer, like June or July, I would say. And you've got 0% interest rate now, and the forbearance time that you're in is not counting towards student loan forgiveness. So that's an important thing to remember. Those who tried to apply for SAVE, but the injunction happened before you were able to get on the plan, you might be sitting in just a regular forbearance, like an administrative forbearance, where we're not taking advantage of the 0% interest, or we don't have that as an option. And also, same story, those months in forbearance are not counting towards loan forgiveness. So this is one bucket you could be in. You're on SAVE, or you're in a forbearance because you tried to get on SAVE and you're not currently on SAVE. The other bucket that you may be in is you may be someone who's on the pay plan, PAYE, or ICR even, income contingent repayment, or IBR, income-based repayment. So you guys on these repayment plans have been making payments. Your payment plan was not affected by the SAVE situation. Those plans at this time have not been paused or frozen. So you've been making payments, and those payments have been counting towards loan forgiveness. Now, since we know that the SAVE plan is not going to be counting towards loan forgiveness, we know that the SAVE plan is very likely to get repealed here soon. If you're someone who's pursuing public service loan forgiveness, or the income-driven loan forgiveness, and you're in that first bucket where you're on SAVE, or you tried to get on SAVE and you couldn't, and you're in forbearance, you are someone who likely needs to go ahead and switch to the income-based repayment plan, or IBR. Income-based repayment is, you could either be on the old IBR plan or the new IBR plan. And this has to do with when you borrowed loans for the first time, how that works for eligibility purposes. So old IBR, you could have loans from any time. And as long as you have direct loans, you can be on the income-based repayment plan, and your monthly payment will be based off of 15% of your discretionary income. This plan has a 25-year timeline to forgiveness, or shorter with PSLF. Could be as short as 10 years with PSLF. If you are a new borrower, considered a new borrower, this is if you had borrowed loans for the first time after July 1st, 2014. So you didn't have a loan balance outstanding as of July 1st, 2014. You would be considered a new borrower. And a new borrower has access to a slightly cheaper payment calculation. It's 10% of discretionary income with a 20-year timeline to forgiveness, much like the pay-as-you-earn plan. It's almost exactly the pay-as-you-earn plan. So back to what you should do if you're in this first bucket, you need to be aware of what your most recently filed tax return on file with the IRS says. Was it a married joint return? Was it a married separate return? And what was that income? Because if you go ahead and switch to this plan now, it's going to link back to that most recently filed tax return first to verify income. Now, you can use alternative documentation of income if your current income is different than what your last year's income looked like. Like if you took a different job and low income is lower, or you didn't get a large bonus this year. One thing to note, though, is if you did file taxes married jointly last year, you're going to have to include your spouse's income, even if you're using alternative documentation of income. That is a requirement. The only way you can avoid this is by filing taxes married separately. Now, this is where maybe there might be some of you that it may not make sense to immediately switch to the IBR plan because maybe last year's income, we filed taxes jointly, and it's going to significantly increase your student loan payment if we go ahead and make that switch now. And let's say we can't afford that payment, or maybe it makes us ineligible for the IBR plan altogether, which we'll talk about here in a second. If that's the case, then you could wait, you could hang out on the SAVE plan temporarily, taking advantage of the 0% interest, knowing that the forbearance is not going to count towards loan forgiveness, and wait until you could file your 2024 taxes married separately to keep the payment off of just your income. One thing I need to mention about the income-based repayment plans is that it does have a payment cap, or a maximum that the payment threshold can reach for eligibility. And this has to do with what's called a partial financial hardship requirement, which sounds really aggressive. But what this means is if you are on an income-driven plan, your income, of course, dictates what your student loan payment is. But the payment on the IBR plan, the pay plan, cannot go above what the standard 10-year payment calculation would be based on the balance at the time of you starting repayment. Now, think back to when you graduated. What was that student loan balance? And then amortize that over a 10-year period. That calculation with the principal and interest calculated into the payment, that monthly payment calculation is what your payment cap is on one of those income-driven plans. So why that's important to know is if you no longer have a partial financial hardship, meaning your payment is higher than what that standard 10-year capped payment calculation is, we can't apply for IBR because we make too much money, essentially, for that payment calculation to be lower than what the standard 10-year payment calculation is. So they would reject your application, making you ineligible for an income-driven plan, which is very problematic if we're going towards loan forgiveness. And one of the requirements is we have to be on an income-driven plan. So this is something to be cognizant of, and this is something that we may need to strategize around if you're really close to that payment cap, but you may need to be switching to the income-based repayment plan if you're not already on it. If you're already on it, and you hit that payment cap, they cannot kick you off of the plan. Basically, they send you a little nasty gram that says, hey, your income is higher than what the standard cap is. You're technically no longer eligible for this income-driven plan. But you can stay on that plan, and that still counts towards PSLF. It still counts towards the income-driven repayment forgiveness. Now, if we're potentially going to be over that payment threshold, there are some things that you can do to try to be under the threshold, and that has to do with reducing your AGI, adjusted gross income. So that's maxing out your 401k plans. That's maxing out any of your other pre-tax accounts like HSAs or FSAs or FSA dependent care. That's looking at filing taxes married separately. And in community property states, that can get really interesting because community property state tax returns, when we file separately, splits the household income. So that could make for some interesting payment calculations, especially if you're the breadwinner. So there are ways that we can make sure that we're still eligible for IBR, or we still fall under that partial financial hardship level. But this is something to be aware of when we're thinking about getting on this plan. You can apply for this income-based repayment plan now if it makes sense for you, or later if you need to do something different with your taxes for 2024 at the studentaid.gov website. Log in, go to the income-driven repayment plan section, and follow the prompts through to submit your application. Now, if you're in my second bucket, which is somebody who's on the pay as you earn plan, you're on the IBR plan, or you're on ICR already, my advice to you right now is to stay put. Because if you're on IBR, that plan is part of legislation. It was written into the law, so it's not going anywhere. It's a very safe plan. If you're on the pay plan, especially, I think you should be staying put because we don't know what's going to happen with pay or ICR, to be fair. So if you're on the pay plan or ICR, I think you should stay put for now because these payments that you're making are counting towards loan forgiveness. They are what you already know the payments to be, so there's no changes. But we do need to be cognizant of the fact that there might be some changes to the pay plan or to ICR in the future if the Department of Education or if the government decides to throw out this ICR statute, which affects those two plans, pay as you earn and ICR. Another fact to just know is that the pay as you earn plan is not a plan you can enroll in now. It is a plan that they sunset back in July of 2024 because SAVE came about and they wanted to simplify the student loan system. So they were reducing the amount of student loan plans that they had available, and pay was one of those plans. So folks are on pay if they were already on it before that deadline, but there's now no new enrollment allowed for pay as you earn. That could change. There could be some push to try to open access to pay as you earn to get people to be able to apply before maybe Trump comes into the presidency or before some of these changes happen to try to get our foot in the door for pay. So it has to stay. I don't know if that would work, but that might be a ploy or it might be some kind of action that's taken to try to push or sway folks into keeping the pay plan potentially. I hope that helps you identify, depending on what bucket that you're in, what you need to be doing, if anything. You may not need to be doing anything. This should give you an idea of what you need to do next. Catch our next video on what Trump plans to do with the PSLF plan. And if you need help with your specific situation, check out our website, studentloanplanner.com. We've got a lot of free calculators online that can help you really navigate this whole scenario that we're going through together. And if you need one-on-one help to really navigate your specific situation, really strategize and save the most money on your student loan plan, check us out. We would be happy to help walk you through the madness of the student loan system, but really simplify it and really get our game plan together for you. Know that you're not alone in this journey. This has been a wild ride, but we are here for you. And stay tuned for our future videos on what to expect next.